Hello everybody, welcome to today. In today's program, we're going to just look at a few things that we're going to go through in computer studies. It is important that you pay attention as we go through them and then what to expect. I have a list here that shows what we're going to treat so that I won't go off tangent, Number one is we're going to define computer. Number two, we're going to show and explain the schematic diagram of how a computer works. Number three, we're going to mention the four basic activities of a computer. Number four, we're going to explain the difference between data and information. And then number five, we're going to mention five characteristics of a computer. Number six, we're going to explain two aspects of a computer. And then number seven, we're going to mention three parts of a hardware. And then number eight, we're going to mention three types of a software. So we're going to look at this one by one so that we will be in a better position to answer questions that comes from there. So number one question here is, what is a computer? Now, the simple answer to this question is this. Computer is an electronic device that accepts inputs or data, processes this data, and then produces an output from the processed data. What did I say? Computer is an electronic device that accepts what? Accepts inputs or data, processes this data, and then produces a useful information. So we just define computer as an electronic device that accepts inputs or data, processes this data, and then produces a useful information or output from the processed data. So computer basically accepts data, processes data, and produces an output. If you are a very fast person who like writing short notes, you can easily say computer is an electronic device that accepts data, processes data, and produces useful information. Simple, and they'll give you your full mark. Thank you very much, as we have looked at the meaning and the definition of computer. The next question here is, what's the next question here? The next question here is define the show and explain the schematic diagram of how computer works. Now I'm going to put a visual of a diagram of how computer works. In this diagram, you will see one part is known as the input, the middle part is known as the processing part, and then the end part is known as the output part. So what the computer does is that he accepts data through the input side. You input data, now computer processes this data, and the computer produces an output. So input, processing, and output, that is a diagram of how computer works. So that is what we call a schematic diagram of how computer works. So when you look at the visual I will put on the screen, you will see input, processing, and the words output. So when they ask you a question, draw a diagram of a computer, draw a diagram of how a computer operates, what we call a schematic diagram of a computer. Schematic diagram is how computer works. Now we're going to go to the next question here, which is mention the four basic activities of computer. Mention the four basic activities of a computer. Now it is important that you remember this. If you are a very fast learner, you are going to pay attention to what I'm going to say now. The four basic activities of a computer. What are the four basic activities of a computer? Number one, computer accepts data input through what we call the input device, like the keyboard, the scanner, and the mouse. The computer accepts what? Accepts data. So the first activity of the computer is to accept data, and accepting data is done through the input device. So if you see a keyboard, it's an input device. When you click on the keyboard, you do what? The computer accepts data through a keyboard, and then the computer can accept data through the scanner too. So the first job of the computer is to accept data. The second function, the second activity of the computer is also to store this data. So they can store this data in a hard disk. They can store it in the memory. They can store it in the memory card of different types. So the computer stores this data in a hard disk, in a memory card, in a diskette. So the second activity of the computer is to store the data that it has received. To store it, that's the second. The first one is to accept this data through the input device like keyboard and scanner. The second one is to store this data. That's the second activity of the computer. The third activity of the computer is to process this data through what we call the CPU, Central Processing Unit. Central what? Processing Unit. Central Processing Unit. That is unit. So the computer processes this data through what we call the CPU, the Central Processing Unit. That's the third activity of the computer. And the fourth and the final one is that the computer displays or produces this data on the screen, or what we call the video. So like I said, the computer does what? The computer, the fourth activity, the fourth and final activities of the computer is what? It brings out, it produces, it releases the result of the processed data in the form of an information, a useful information. It produces that through an output unit or an output device known as either the monitor, the screen of the monitor, or through the printer. Do you understand what I'm saying? The screen of the monitor or through the printer. So the computer does four basic things. Number one, it accepts data through the input device known as an example of which is the keyboard or the mouse. Now, the second one is that it can store this data, store it in a memory card, in a hard disk, or in a diskette. Number three, it can process this data. It processes this data through the CPU, Central Processing Unit. And the fourth one, it produces this data as a useful information through what we call the output unit. The output unit, it produces you see it in what we call the screen of the monitor or the visual display unit. Thank you very much for that one. As we move on to the next question, which is what? What's the next question? The next question here is, explain the difference between data and information. What is the difference between data and information? Now listen, data is the raw file, data is the raw unprocessed file. Example, the age, the height, the letters of the alphabet. These are data. They don't have any valid or any implied meaning in any way. They are called data. So if you look at the color of something, so like I said, the data is just that, the raw fact, the raw file, like the age, the letters of the alphabet that you input into the computer through the keyboard, the color, it does not have any implied meaning. It does not have any contextual meaning. So it's just data that you put into the computer. Now, information on the other hand is a meaningful statement, a useful information, a useful idea that has been derived from a lot of data. Do you understand me? So when you put data, computer help you to process the data to make a meaning out of it. So what the computer has been able to make out of the data you have put in is what we know as information. So data is raw file, information is processed data. Do you understand? You can make it, you can say it in this way: data is a raw file, while raw fact with no contextual meaning, while information is processed data. Do you understand? Processed file, meaningful statement, meaningful arrangement of what? Of data, meaningful arrangement of facts. That's what information is all about. Thank you. Let's go to the next question here. The next question here is what's the next question here? That's number 4 is explain the difference between data and information. Good. The next question here, mention 5 characteristics of a computer. Mention 5 characteristics of a computer. The next question here is the 5 characteristics of a computer. The 5 characteristics of a computer. Now, the 5 characteristics of a computer, pay attention very carefully so that you can answer this question easily and then make the full mark out of it. The 5 characteristics of a computer are: 1, it has speed;